Oob Kane Thomas didn't wear a mask the first time he taught a teenager how to snatch a purse on a moving moped. But by the time police realized who he was, he'd already turned a group of lost London boys into a ghost-like army that terrorized the streets. Under his silent command, riders like Malik, Streak, Dyer and twins Jordan and Jamal Rose zipped through neighborhoods with surgical precision, yanking handbags, smashing shop windows, and vanishing before anyone could even shout for help. For months, families across South London lived in fear, until a hidden police unit decided to flip the script. This time, they were the ones recording everything and the gang had no idea. In the quiet corners of South London, life used to wind down peacefully as the sun dipped below the rooftops. Children played on the sidewalks, delivery drivers made their final rounds, and families settled into their routines. But as spring turned to summer, something changed. It began subtly at first. A few purse snatchings, a stolen mobile phone here or there. Locals whispered about strange incidents, but nobody imagined the nightmare that was forming. Then the attacks escalated. It started with a teenager dragged across the pavement outside a grocery store in Clapham. Witnesses said two masked figures on a black moped zoomed past, one grabbing the girl's bag and yanking her to the ground without slowing. She screamed as her head hit the curb, her arm dislocated. No one saw their faces. No one got a license plate. They were ghosts on wheels. The next night, an elderly man was knocked unconscious outside a fish and chip shop in Tooting. This time, they took his entire shopping bag and vanished before anyone could react. By the end of that week, 7 more victims came forward, each with the same story: fast-moving mopes, blacked-out visors, and no warning. Word spread quickly through WhatsApp groups and local Facebook pages. Parents stopped letting their children walk alone. Teenagers were told to leave school in groups. Even delivery drivers became targets, robbed of food, phones, and motorbikes in broad daylight. The gang wasn't just active at night. They struck during school runs, lunchtime rushes, and early mornings. Their confidence was growing, and so was the community's fear. Shops began closing earlier. Streets that were once lively became empty after sunset. The gang's method was always the same. One moped acted as a blocker, zigzagging through traffic to clear a path. Another carried 2 riders, one to steer, the other to strike. They worked in tight coordination, sometimes hitting multiple locations within an hour. Even when police were alerted instantly, it was too late. The mopeds would weave through narrow alleys, cut across parks, and vanish into London's tangled roadways. Patrol cars couldn't keep up, and foot chases were pointless. For 6 months, reports flooded in. Over 200 crimes linked to the same style, the same riders, the same machines. Yet no one had a name. Not a single fingerprint. The helmets and gloves they wore left no clues. They avoided CCTV blind spots with shocking precision, as if they had mapped the entire city. In some cases, they even disabled security cameras with quick sprays of paint before attacking. It wasn't random. It was strategic. The gang operated like a military unit with perfect timing and chilling efficiency. Residents felt like prisoners in their own homes. Families who had lived in their neighborhoods for generations began considering moving away. One woman, a nurse returning from a late shift, was cornered just meters from her door. They didn't just rob her. They taunted her, circled around like vultures, then ripped her handbag away before speeding off into the night. She never left the house after dark again. News outlets picked up the story, but even that didn't help. The media called them the London Mope Menace, and their crimes seemed to worsen with every headline. They smashed into jewelry shops with hammers. They targeted mothers with strollers. They didn't care about security guards, alarms, or police patrols. If someone got in their way, they were knocked aside without hesitation. What terrified people most wasn't just the violence. It was the speed. In 15 to 20 seconds, the gang could strike, steal, and disappear. It was as if they were ghosts, untouchable and always 2 steps ahead. But behind the panic and chaos, one was becoming clear to the authorities. This wasn't a random group of reckless criminals. It was something more calculated, more dangerous. Someone was calling the shots. Someone was organizing it all from the shadows, and that meant, eventually, they could be found. Despite the chaos, the Metropolitan Police refused to accept defeat. In hushed meetings behind closed doors, a new theory was gaining attention. This was no loose group of thrill-seeking teens. The precision, the escape routes, the split-second timing, it all pointed to leadership. Someone with experience was pulling the strings. Someone who understood London's streets better than the police themselves. The crimes weren't random, and they weren't opportunistic. They were part of a system. And at the center of that system was a name few people knew. Kane Thomas, also known only by his street alias Ghost. No one could confirm who Ghost really was. There were no photographs, no recent records. Some said he used to be a professional motorcycle stunt rider before vanishing from the scene. Others believed he had once worked for a courier company, memorizing shortcuts and alleyways that allowed him to vanish like smoke. What was certain was that this man, whoever he truly was, had managed to recruit, train, and command a group of criminals who operated more like a squadron than a gang. One officer reviewing case files noticed a strange trend. Many of the riders identified through witness accounts were barely adults, some as young as 14. Yet their riding skills were beyond what any street racer could manage. They could make impossible turns, swerve through tight gaps, and coordinate mid-ride without a word exchanged. That kind of skill didn't come from watching online videos. It came from instruction. Someone had trained them. Someone had given them purpose and a system to follow. The break came in the form of a burnt-out mope dumped behind an abandoned warehouse in Brixton. While the bike itself had been reduced to charred metal, investigators noticed the warehouse nearby had signs of recent use. Scraped floors, scattered food wrappers, and fresh tire marks on the ground. Inside, among the debris, they found something chilling: a child's school backpack reported stolen only 3 weeks earlier. It hadn't been emptied or dumped. It had been stored. That small clue proved the gang had a base, a place where stolen items were brought, sorted, and possibly redistributed. A deeper search of the area revealed more. Hidden under loose wooden boards, officers discovered a makeshift map of South London's boroughs marked in red ink. Some roads had symbols next to them, small excess arrows or circles. It wasn't clear at first, but one detective realized they weren't random marks. They were getaway paths, escape zones, and danger points. It was a custom-built blueprint of crime routes. Someone had designed it after careful observation. This discovery shifted the investigation into new territory. It was no longer just about catching masked robbers. It was about uncovering an underground network, one with a structure, a leader, and a strategy. A task force was created in secret, known only to a handful of high-ranking officers. Their job wasn't to chase the mopeds. It was to infiltrate the operation and gather evidence from the inside, the playing watch, record, and understand the system before striking. Weeks passed, and the gang continued their reign. But behind the scenes, the police had eyes on them. They began monitoring online forums, tracking suspicious social media accounts, and planting discreet surveillance cameras along the gang's favorite escape routes. They also began mapping incidents and creating digital heat maps to predict the next hit. And more than anything, they began to notice patterns. The gang never hit the same neighborhood twice in 1 week. They avoided areas with high police presence. They favored streets with multiple exits. And most notably, they avoided digital payment stores and businesses with cloud-based CCTV. This confirmed what the task force suspected. Someone had taught them how to stay invisible in a world full of cameras. Despite all the technology, it wasn't a computer that brought them closer to Ghost. It was human error. A junior gang member, eager to show off, posted a blurred photo on a private Instagram account. Just a shot of his gloved hand gripping a moped handlebar with the caption, 20 seconds flat. The post was quickly deleted, but it had already been flagged by a monitoring bot. From that one image, police traced the account, the device, and eventually the rider. He led them to a meetup point in Camberwell, an old cinema that had been closed for over a decade. There, police planted a hidden microphone and a tiny surveillance lens. What they saw shocked them. The gang wasn't just meeting. They were training, practicing getaway turns, studying street maps, rehearsing robbery plans, and in the far corner, partially obscured by shadow, stood a tall figure wearing a gray hoodie. He never spoke, never revealed his face, but the others listened to him with complete attention. Ghost wasn't just a myth, he was real. And now, you got this. The police had their first look at the man behind London's terror. The discovery of the abandoned cinema in Camberwell marked a turning point. For the first time, the police had something solid. Visual proof of the gang's gathering place and a silent glimpse of their leader. But it wasn't enough to make arrests. They needed undeniable evidence that could stand in court: stolen property, operational planning, and links between the gang members and actual crimes. So, instead of moving in, the task force decided to play a longer game. They began to set the trap. They designed a strategy called Operation Magnet. At the heart of it was a bait scooter, an ordinary-looking Vespa parked casually outside a busy bakery in Southwark, an area previously hit by the gang. The vehicle was anything but ordinary. Inside its seat, hidden beneath layers of foam, was a GPS tracking device, fingerprint traps, and a miniature camera that would activate the moment the ignition was tampered with. The location was chosen carefully: high pedestrian traffic, narrow alley exits, and just enough cover to make it tempting. The gang took the bait quicker than anyone expected. At 3:11 a.m., two masked figures on a separate moped pulled up beside the Vespa. The second rider jumped off, scanned the area, and began fiddling with the ignition. As soon as he inserted a tool, the camera inside the seat silently activated. A clear image of gloved hands and part of a jacket sleeve was recorded. He managed to get the Vespa started and took off. What he didn't know was that a drone had been launched from a nearby rooftop, tailing him silently from above. For the next 4 nights, the task force let the bait play out. They watched from a distance as the stolen scouter changed hands. One night it was seen parked near a kebab shop. The next, it was spotted outside a block of flats in Lewisham. Each location added a piece to the puzzle. Each movement was logged and mapped. Eventually, the Vespa ended up inside a fenced garage behind a laundromat in Peckham. That's when the team made their next move: covert surveillance of the entire block. Micro cameras were hidden in lampposts and bins. License plates of nearby vehicles were logged. Officers disguised as joggers, homeless men, and late-night food delivery drivers moved through the area collecting intel. Patterns began to emerge. A group of young males frequently entered the garage late at night and left just before sunrise. None of them lived in the apartments above. They came with backpacks and left with nothing. But most importantly, one of them matched the figure seen in the bait scooter video. The same sleeve, the same gloves. At the same time, police began digging into reports of stolen mopes across the city. They discovered something unexpected. Several of the bikes used in past crimes had been reported missing not from individuals, but from impound lots and repair shops. The gang had been hitting places where unclaimed mopeds were stored, fixing them up, and rotating them through their network. This explained how they always had fresh vehicles without leaving a paper trail. But while the stolen vehicles and the garage in Peckham were major wins, what the task force needed most was something bigger, something that would expose the gang's leadership, their communication system, and their plans. That's when they turned their attention to digital surveillance. The burner phones used by the gang were nearly impossible to trace, but analysts noticed something strange. Every major hit was preceded by a burst of Bluetooth signals in a small radius near the abandoned cinema. It suggested the gang was using a local network, a mesh of short-range communication that couldn't be intercepted from afar. The only way to listen in was to be close. So, officers planted a new hidden device near the cinema's rear entrance, a tiny receiver capable of capturing digital handshakes between nearby devices. Within days, they began receiving fragments. Short, coded instructions, timestamps, and nicknames. One message stood out: Camden Icebox. Thram, 2 mins max. The task force decoded the slang quickly. Icebox was code for a jewelry store known for holding high-value gems. 2 mines max was their operation window. The police now had advance notice of a major robbery, but they weren't going to stop it. Not yet. For Operation Magnet to succeed, they needed to let the crime unfold, so they could capture not just the riders, but the planners, the watchers, and, most importantly, the ghost himself. The night of the planned robbery arrived cloaked in heavy clouds and a wind that whispered through London's alleyways. Rain threatened but hadn't yet begun. The city moved as usual on the surface, but beneath that calm, the Metropolitan Police were preparing for one of the most coordinated surveillance operations in recent history. Hidden teams were stationed across Camden. Drones waited silently above rooftops. Officers in plain clothes moved like shadows along side streets. And at the center of it all, Operation Magnet was about to reach its climax. At 2006 a.m., the first sign of movement appeared. 2 mopeds without license plates approaching the rear of the high-end jewelry store. 4 riders, dressed in black with helmets and gloves, stopped near a locked alley gate. Another pair arrived moments later from the opposite direction. They moved with complete confidence, knowing their roles and trusting the timing. Just as the gang's messages had said, they had 2 minutes. One rider pulled out a bolt cutter and began snapping the lock. The others readied small hammers and crowbars. Within seconds, the gate fell open, and the gang flooded the alley. A single sledgehammer blow shattered the rear glass door of the jewelry shop. The alarm triggered instantly, but the gang didn't flinch. Inside, they rushed for the display cases, some smashing them open, others grabbing pre-marked trays of rings and loose diamonds. All of it had been scouted and planned in advance. The shop's layout, camera angles, and even alarm delay time had been accounted for. But what the gang didn't know was that the police were letting it happen. Every second of the robbery was being recorded from multiple drone angles, body cams on hidden officers, and a high-resolution lens planted across the street. Each rider's movements were tracked and logged in real time. Every stolen item would later be cataloged, matched with footage, and used as evidence. As the gang fled, their escape began exactly as planned. The mopes roared down side roads, splitting into 2 directions. One group took the main route toward Holloway Road. The other headed east toward King's Cross, aiming to vanish into the network of canals and tunnels. But the streets weren't empty. They were surrounded. The group heading toward Holloway was the first to be intercepted as they entered a tunnel near the overpass. Retractable spike strips activated beneath their tires. 2 mopes skidded violently, their riders thrown to the ground. Within seconds, plainclothes officers emerged from unmarked vans, tackling the stunned criminals before they could flee. One attempted to run but was taken down after a short foot chase. The other cried out in pain, his ankle shattered in the fall. The eastbound group didn't fare much better. As they neared Regent's Canal, a drone followed closely overhead, tracking their position with infrared imaging. Officers in boats were already waiting along the dark waterway. When one rider attempted to ditch his mope and dive into the canal, the cold water stunned him, and he flailed helplessly before being pulled out by police. The other was boxed in on all sides, cornered between a brick wall and a police barricade he hadn't anticipated. In total, 7 riders were arrested that night. Their gloves, jackets, and bags were seized on the spot. Inside one backpack was a burner phone still active. Its last message sent only minutes before the robbery began. That message led police directly to a high-rise apartment in Hackney. When officers arrived, they found the front door wide open, as if the occupant had left in a hurry. The apartment was sparse but revealing. There were maps on the wall, blueprints of various businesses, and a corkboard filled with scribbled notes and images. But what stood out most was a laptop left running on the kitchen table. It displayed a live feed from the jewelry store's ally, recorded from the gang's own camera. Ghost hadn't just been planning the heist. He'd been watching it unfold in real time from his safe house. Police traced the apartment's rental records to a fake name, but fingerprints on the kitchen faucet gave their first real identity for Ghost Kane Thomas. A man with no criminal record, but a background that now made sense. a former motorcycle stunt trainer, discharged from his job 5 years ago for disciplinary issues, and suspected of involvement in underground racing. That night, the gang's reign was shattered. The silence of their crimes was replaced by the noise of sirens and chains. But one question still lingered. Where had Ghost gone in the final moments? His face had yet to be captured, and the man at the center of the terror had vanished once again. In the days following the dramatic arrests, London began to breathe again. News of the successful sting spread fast, splashed across headlines and TV screens. Moped gang busted in midnight sting was the leading story in every paper. Citizens celebrated the swift end of a reign of terror that had kept them indoors, afraid to walk even the shortest distances. Parents walked their kids to school with newfound confidence. Delivery riders moved without fear. But behind the celebration, the investigation was far from over. The gang's leader, Kane Thomas, better known as Ghost, was still out there, and police knew he wouldn't stay hidden for long. The laptop recovered from the Hackney apartment was a gold mine. Analysts at Scotland Yard dug into its encrypted files and uncovered detailed schedules, route diagrams, and folders titled with codenames like Storm, Flash, and Echo. Each one represented a past operation. Some had already been linked to reported robberies. Others matched open cases with no known suspects. It became clear that Ghost wasn't just a leader. He was a strategist. He had developed and managed a network of riders, lookouts, scouts, and even mechanics who maintained the mopeds in hidden garages across the city. What disturbed investigators most was the level of manipulation involved. Many of the gang's younger members came from broken homes, had dropped out of school, or were lured in with promises of fast money and protection. Some believed they were part of a movement, a misunderstood brotherhood rebelling against a system that had failed them. Ghost used that to his advantage. Through burner phones and coded meetings, he fed them orders while keeping his identity hidden. He never showed up at robberies. He never left fingerprints. He had built a criminal empire from the shadows. But mistakes were finally catching up to him. From the burner phone recovered during the heist, digital forensics pulled out deleted messages, location data, and even timestamps. One message linked Goss to a woman living in East Croydon, a former girlfriend who hadn't seen him in over a year. When questioned, she revealed something crucial. Kane had a half-brother who owned a small auto repair shop in Walthamstow. Surveillance was placed on the shop, and within a week, officers spotted a man resembling Kane enter late one night, stay for several hours, and leave wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his face. A warrant was issued immediately. Police raided the shop just after dawn, finding modified mopeds, forged license plates, and documents linking Kane to the operation. But Kane himself was gone. Again, it seemed like every time they got close, he slipped through their fingers. Then, a break came from an unexpected source. One of the younger gang members, just 16 years old, agreed to cooperate in exchange for leniency. He claimed he'd once delivered a backpack full of phones and cash to a contact of Kane's near the Thames barrier. According to him, Ghost rarely stayed in one place and moved through a network of squats, vacant buildings, and short-term rentals booked under stolen identities. But the teen offered something better, a voice recording on his phone. It was a short audio clip of Kane issuing instructions, coded but clearly a voice of authority. It was the first time investigators had Ghost's voice on record. Using that audio, analysts matched the voice to old footage of Kane from his stunt riding days. It was a perfect match. Scotland Yard now had a confirmed identity, a voice, fingerprints, and digital footprints. The net was closing. Just 3 weeks after the Camden heist, Kane Thomas was finally captured inside a storage facility near the London City Airport. He had been living inside one of the units, off-grid and surrounded by burner phones, maps, and over 80,000 in stolen jewelry wrapped in rags. When arrested, he didn't resist. He didn't speak. He simply stared straight ahead, as if accepting the fall of his empire. In court, 17 members of the Moped gang were tried together. Kane was charged with conspiracy to commit armed robbery, leading a criminal enterprise, and corruption of minors. The evidence, especially the footage gathered during Operation Magnet, was overwhelming. Each detail, each PS trace, each intercepted message painted a clear picture of guilt. The city moved on, streets filled again with people. Shops opened longer hours. But in quiet moments, Londoners still remembered the screech of engines in the dark, a fear that once ruled their lives, now locked away with the man who created it. Ghost's empire had fallen, not with a dramatic chase or a gunfight, but with camera's patience and the truth finally catching up to the shadows.